Elizabeth Alice Louise.
I, Anne Elizabeth Alice Louise.
Take thee, Mark Antony Peter.
Take thee, Mark Antony Peter.
To my wedded husband.
To my wedded husband.
Take thee, Diana Frances.
Take thee, Diana Frances.
To my wedded wife.
To my wedded wife.
To have and to hold from this day.
It is tragic, but it does seem likely that 1,000 years of British royal history is, at this moment, going down the drain.
The British royal family is faced with a crisis that it clearly does not know how to solve.
I think when we wrote the book Fall of the House of Windsor, we were trying to ask questions and raise doubts in people's mind about the existence of the royal family. And we're certainly not going to condemn it and say it shouldn't exist, but I think it will go on to a future generation in a greatly modified form.
Who were some of the prominent monarchs of this century? Victoria, who had the longest reign the country has ever known, whose rule coincided with the heyday of the empire. Edward VII, gambler and womanizer, lover of Lily Langtry and later Mrs. Keppel. He was the last prominent member of the royal family to be forced to testify in court in a slander case. George V, a great reformer of the monarchy who did much to make it what it is today. He even foresaw the public resentment of the extended civil list. It was on the death of George V that the monarchy was thrown into its first major crisis of the century.
That I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility.
Edward VIII, the uncrowned king. He inherited the throne in January 1936. By the end of the year, he was in exile.
Of the woman I love.
I think the abdication was a dreadful shock to the British public. It certainly shattered their faith in the royal family, who were deemed godlike until that fateful moment, and it has made the public suspicious about the royals even to this day.
If we had been handling the abdication of Edward VIII today, it would have been entirely different than it was in our grandfather's days. We would have known by now all the background to Wallis Simpson. We'd have known everything about her. We had the family history, we had all the snapshots. We'd have known even down to the fact that she'd spent time honing the trade in a Chinese brothel.
It was a Secret Service dossier called the China Report that detailed the life of Wallis in Peking and Shanghai. It also alleged that she had worked in a singing house, in reality a high-class brothel where she joined in various practices and was taught some exotic love-making techniques.
Many people fail to recognize the fact that the reason that Edward VIII had to be disposed of as quickly as he was is because he had not yet been crowned. And during the coronation ceremony, the monarch pledges to God, to the people, and to the state that he or she will be there until called by God.
It was a clash, basically, between a king who wanted to marry and a prime minister and government that did not believe that the person he wanted to marry was a fit person to be the queen.
The crisis was slight compared to what would have happened if Edward had become king. He remained a firm enthusiast of the Nazis. He met Hitler before the war and responded to his Nazi salute with the words, "Heil Hitler!" When war broke out, Edward took refuge in Spain and was appointed Governor-General of the Bahamas. Sadly, Edward was never reconciled with his family. The next time attention was focused on the private life of royalty came just after the Queen's coronation. Princess Margaret wanted to marry her father's former aide and confidant, Group Captain Peter Townsend.
She should have been able to marry him because he presented a very good image. He fought in the war. He was, I believe, a fighter pilot with a very good record. And she clearly was very fond of him, and I think it was very sad that she wasn't able to marry him.
Margaret eventually married the fashionable photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones. The marriage was to come under considerable pressure in the 1970s. They eventually divorced in 1976. This was the first divorce so close to the crown since Henry VIII.
Everyone thought that there would never be divorce in the royal family, and that whatever happened, that they had to present a stiff upper lip and get on with their lives and live with their unhappiness. Princess Margaret's divorce was the first time that people saw that there was a chink in this, that there could be divorce, and that the royal family were just like everyone else. They had unhappy marriages.
No one knows whether Princess Margaret married Anthony Armstrong Jones, or Lord Snowdon as he became, on the rebound. There was obviously a great deal of affection there at the start. Sadly, it didn't last too long into their marriage.
When Princess Margaret was divorced, there was something of a precedent in the 1960s with the divorce and remarriage of the Earl of Harwood. But in terms of closeness to the monarch, the divorce of Princess Margaret was without precedent.
Princess Margaret is a rather tragic and lonely figure. Her life seemed to hold so much for her. She was perhaps the prettier of the two sisters. She didn't have the burden of responsibility that the Queen had to bear. And yet now she is a tragic and rather sad, pathetic, very lonely, I think, figure.
Through the 20th century, the monarchy became more and more public and accessible to the people. Ceremonies that had fallen into disuse were revived, such as the state opening of Parliament, while others, such as the trooping of the colour, became regular royal occasions for the first time. But one ceremony had never been seen by the people, the coronation.
As he gently lowers it, a great shout is raised from the congregation.
When the bright new Elizabethan age dawned, the Queen made a conscious decision herself to be more approachable and to make the monarchy more open to its subjects.
The royal family are, whether they like it or not, in show business. They have a very, very high profile. They are the recipients of millions of pounds from the public, from public money. The public own them. They're entitled to know what they're doing.
It's a wonderful fallacy that the royal family read newspapers. The lower end of the tabloid press actually believe that when they write something foul and filthy, that great tremors go through Balmoral or Sandringham or Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle, wherever the royal family is. The simple fact is that most of the royal family do not read newspapers.
I think that if the Queen could wave a magic wand, she would rather wave it and dismiss every prying lens and every prying microphone and every inquisitive journalist.
On one level, the interests of the royal family coincided with those of the media. The enduring public fascination with royalty extended to their private lives, so that personal milestones such as marriages and the birth of children became public property. As the Queen's children have grown up, they have become hostages to fortune. The first was Princess Anne. Their early years were memorable, chiefly for their contributions to various equestrian events, a frivolous image that did neither of them any favours.
Princess Anne grew up loving horses, which is, of course, a great trait of the royal family. They're surrounded by horses. There's a royal mews just about everywhere. They go riding from a very early age. And she was a very horsey girl, and she showed a lot of spirit, and she showed a lot of talent. And in fact, of course, became in the early 70s the 3-day event champion of Europe, beating the Russians, the Germans, and her fellow Britons. And as a horsey person, she was involved almost 24 hours a day in the equine world, in the equestrian world. And there was no more greater figure in that world than Captain Mark Phillips.
Mark, whose nickname in the army was Fog, because he was thought to be thick and wet, seemed a strange choice as a husband. And it's certain that Anne was the dominant partner.
By 1984, it was no longer possible to disguise the fact that their marriage was in trouble. There were also allegations of a more serious nature concerning events that surfaced in 1991, when a woman in New Zealand named Mark Phillips as the father of her 6-year-old daughter.
Hello? No, I'm afraid he's out on the farm at the moment. Who's speaking? Oh, Heather Tonkin. Yes, I'm glad you've called. Well, I've just been going through the accounts, and I see there have been a number of payments made to you in New Zealand as an equestrian consultant. Is that right? Well, we don't seem to have any invoices for them, so could you explain what these services have been? This is Anne speaking.
Mark never accepted that he was the child's father, but he is believed to have set up a trust fund which gags the mother from ever linking him again with the pretty daughter. Mark was never particularly popular with the other members of the royal family, and this episode estranged him further from them.
So how's boring old Foggy, then?
Rather less boring than you always suspected. I think he's had an affair.
No, seriously. Are you sure?
Well, fairly. There's some woman from New Zealand who keeps ringing him up at Gatcombe, and I know he's paid her money.
Have you asked him about it?
Yes. But you know what he's like. Any chance he gets, he hides behind the business. He just met her a couple of times last year, and she's been doing some research for him. I can't prove anything.
Well, at least that one's kept out of the papers. How do you feel about it?
I don't really know, to be quite honest. I mean, we've drifted so far apart, I'm not really sure that I care.
But that's terrible, Anne. What are you going to do?
I don't really say I have to do anything, do I? There are still the children and the horses. Look, we're good friends, really. We've just gone our separate ways.
He was always a bit defensive, wasn't he?
I wouldn't say that. He always wanted to keep his independence. That's why the farm matters so much to him.
Would it help if you took some time off? Your workload seems enormous at the moment.
I don't think so. If anything, I'd rather do more. I'm planning another trip to Africa for Save the Children at the moment. I think there's a lot more I can do.
Are you sure?
Positive. I mean, it does rather set one's own troubles in perspective, doesn't it? And it's the sense of achievement that really makes it worthwhile. It's funny. I never thought I'd want a proper job. But here I am.
You might share that with some of the others, if you get the chance. Come in. I've got to go now, a visit to Portsmouth. Ah, good morning, Commander.
Good morning, ma'am.
Anne, have you met my new equerry, Commander Lawrence?
How do you do?
In April 1989, Buckingham Palace named Timothy Lawrence as the author of certain letters stolen from Princess Anne's briefcase and sent to a newspaper. The contents were said to be affectionate. The ever-discreet officer behaved with dignity and silence when the story broke in the press, but they were obviously love letters.
In the case of Princess Anne and the sailor, who is clearly going to marry her, I believe that the press treated their love letters with taste and dignity because they didn't really want to upset the apple cart. I don't think it's because they're overly fond. We are overly fond of Anne. And often there are many things about the royal family we know that we have never published. But I believe that because she'd cleaned up her act, because she had done so much that the public admired, there's no point pouring soot down the chimney of somebody the public admired.
Princess Anne should have been the next king or queen. Prince Philip has always thought of his elder son as a wimp, and his other children are not mentioned. The person who's strongest in the family and the person most loved by Prince Philip is Princess Anne.
I think Anne threw herself into her job because of the state of her marriage. But as a workaholic, she seems to enjoy it. She's doing a great job for the British royal family. If the British royal family is to survive, it would be by taking heed of the ethics of hard work and royal duty that Princess Anne seems to adhere to.
While Anne's life appeared settled through the 1970s, her older brother had quite a different image. Prince Charles was then an action man at heart. While he could appear serious and dutiful, he had, and still has, an adventurous and escapist streak. Speculation was growing about who he would choose to join him on the throne.
Camilla Parker Bowles was perhaps the love of Charles's life. Perhaps the only love in truth. He was passionate about her up until the time of his marriage. He, when married, said farewell to her. They remained platonic friends.
I don't believe Charles was ever romantically inclined. I don't think that he felt that he was an Errol Flynn, a great stud. I think he realized that he was vastly eligible. He, with the passage of time, could be the king, and he knew that would be very attractive to many people.
By no means can you consider Prince Charles a knight in shining armour in the classical sense. He's got jug ears, a big nose, and talks to vegetables. But he was perhaps still is, the future King of England, and as such, as a young man, had no difficulty attracting the ladies. He's hardly, though, a passionate or a romantic. He is an intellectual. But he had his flings.
In 1980, Charles travelled to Zimbabwe for the independence ceremony and subsequent celebrations. Camilla Shand, now Parker Bowles, travelled as his official escort. Charles returned to woo the young Diana Spencer. Their romance became common knowledge that summer until their engagement was announced in February 1981, with Diana sporting a beautiful £28,000 diamond and sapphire engagement ring.
It was not a normal courtship by any modern standards. On the one hand, Prince Charles was under pressure to find a bride, from his parents particularly, because they were anxious to see him married.
Charles, I think, had been sent out to catch a virgin. He'd been told it was time to settle down and start having children.
When Prince Charles decided he was going to marry Diana, the person who gave him her unqualified support and, in a way, permission was Camilla.
Even way back when Charles and Diana had just got engaged and the marriage was announced and the wedding presents started to come in, Princess Diana was absolutely devastated to find a package in Charles's private quarters which she thought was a wedding present to them both. And when she opened it, she found out, in fact, it was a present from Camilla, a private present, a personal present from Camilla to Charles. And I think then she perhaps got an inkling that she's up against a very difficult battle, that there was one woman who would always be in the shadow of their marriage.
They were married in July 1981, and to begin with, they were clearly happy. True, Charles may not have been the most conventional of romantic husbands, but the newlyweds were obviously in love, and it was only gradually to become clear that Charles would be upstaged by his beautiful wife. Diana became pregnant almost immediately. Prince William was born in June the next year, and it wasn't too long after the birth of William that commentators noticed that Diana was looking painfully thin.
Bulimia, which is spelled B-U-L-I-M-I-A, or bulimia nervosa, to give it its rather grander name, is an eating disorder. It's not unlike anorexia, which more people have heard of. Now, in anorexia, people starve themselves until they get really, really thin. Sometimes they, I'm afraid, starve themselves to death. In bulimia, it's rather harder to detect because quite often the woman concerned, and it is nearly always a woman, is of average weight. You wouldn't know anything was wrong by looking at her.
Under the pressure of a psychosomatic condition and the stress experienced by any young mother, Diana was finding life difficult. The endless round of official engagements can only have made her problems worse.
Diana, isn't it about time you got ready? Diana?
Sorry, what did you say?
Isn't it time you got ready?
I don't think I can face it, Charles. Do we have to go?
I'm not serious.
Well, yes, I am, actually. I'm exhausted. The baby's due to wake up in about an hour. We've hardly spent any time together recently. We've been to the cenotaph. Can't we just spend a quiet evening by ourselves now? It doesn't really seem too much to ask.
Look, I'm sorry, my darling, but we have to go.
I wish you'd stop saying that, Charles. Day in, day out, you just keep saying, we have to do this and we have to do that. Well, why? Why should I parade around the country every day just because I'm told I have to? What about me, Charles? What about what I want?
You're being ridiculous. It's your duty to attend an official function. And duty has to come first. Don't you understand that? Because if you don't, it's about time you did. It's part of the job. It's part of your life. It's not something you can do at your convenience just when it suits you.
I'm not going. I refuse to.
Which, don't you see, you've got to come. It doesn't matter what you feel or what I feel. We've got no choice.
Yes, we have. Or I have anyway, and I choose not to go. Can't you get that into your head? Go to the bloody Albert Hall by yourself, can't you? Tell them I'm ill. Tell them anything you like. Oh, God, but just go away and leave me alone.
Charles's lack of rapport with his young wife became increasingly apparent. In 1982, Charles arrived for the Remembrance Day ceremony at the Royal Albert Hall alone, saying his wife was not well. Yet 5 minutes later, Diana arrived. Things went from bad to worse, with claims of suicide attempts.
Many things went wrong in the marriage. First of all, he fell out of love with her, or, as he'd never been in love with her, love evaporated.
If the Princess of Wales is bulimic, which I think is probably the case, she certainly cannot be a happy person, can she?
They didn't like each other. It was quite clear they didn't like each other. There was no affection. They weren't tactile. There was no more touching. There were no more affectionate pats on the bottom from him to her. And they would arrive at places and split. And their backs to each other. And he, of course, felt this very strongly because he knew that she was upstaging him all the time.
What's this I hear about Diana?
It was just an accident. She slipped on the stairs and fell over.
To hear my mother talk about it, it sounded more serious.
I don't think so. She only fell the last 3 steps, but the doctors checked her over all the same, and everything's fine.
Is it?
What do you mean?
Come on, Charles. You two haven't made much attempt to hide your occasional differences of opinion.
I've tried to keep it quiet, really.
But that's quite hard in a place like this, isn't it? And once the servants start gossiping, it's only a matter of time before word gets around outside the firm as well. You know that.
I don't know what's happened. I mean, I can't honestly say that I've changed in the last year or so, but Everything's suddenly different.
Children can have that effect on a marriage, you know.
Yes, but this seems to go rather further than that.
Have you tried talking about it?
There's not much chance of that at the moment. I mean, it's as though she can't stand to be in the same room as me. She goes all tense and starts talking loudly about something else the moment I mention anything remotely serious.
Do you think you can sort things out between you?
I don't know. To be quite honest, I think we could have made a terrible mistake.
The birth of their second child, Prince Harry, in 1984, kept up the pretense that all was well. In public, they mastered the art of putting on a united front, but behind the facade, things continued to deteriorate. Diana felt a stranger in her own home. In 1986, on a tour of Canada, proof positive emerged that the marriage was effectively over. In Vancouver, attending the Expo World Fair, the princess, clearly suffering from the effects of her bulimia, fainted in public.
Charles didn't rush to her side. He told her to pull herself together and to make herself presentable for that evening's festivities.
She feels that she hasn't been given the support not only by her husband, but by her husband's family and the officials in Buckingham Palace. And she feels that everything she's done has been on her own. And some of that is true, a lot of it isn't. And what has happened is that she has observed that he doesn't love her. He has said in cruel moments that he never loved her. And she's had to live with that, and she's had to make her own life.
Charles's utter frustration with his sham marriage came about 5 years into it. At that time, he'd given up the one love of his life, Camilla. He'd stayed with Diana for those 5 years. After 5 years, he went back to Camilla, and she became his comfort, his shoulder to cry on. I think it's significant that whenever Princess Diana visited Highgrove after an absence when Charles had been there, she would walk straight over to the telephone and press the redial button. At the end of the line was the Parker Bowles household on every occasion.
Hello, is that the number for Camilla?
But around this time, there was a distraction. A new character joined the firm.
Fergie was the first public non-virgin to enter the royal family. She seemed like a breath of fresh air to them all, but particularly, of course, to Andy. Prince Andrew, whose nickname is, in the public press, Randy Andy. And it was a case of mutual attraction.
Andrew relished life in the Navy. He had what seemed the best of both worlds, the advantages of being a member of the royal family with few responsibilities, leaving himself free to pursue a more adventurous, fun-filled lifestyle. Yet there was always a question mark over the extent of his popularity. At school, he was known as the Great I Am. The discipline of a naval career may provide what is otherwise lacking in his life.
To the British public at large, and indeed certainly to the press, Prince Andrew has become to be considered rather boorish. The Prince of Yob is one epithet that's been thrown at him. This is to people who don't know him terribly well. To those who do, to fellow serving officers in the Navy, he is sometimes an intolerable snob.
Good morning.
Morning.
Cheers. Good to be back at sea. You know, I haven't been on a ship this size since the Falklands. Were you down there?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, bad luck. Have you always been a desk jockey?
If you must know, I drove a frigate on the Armilla patrol for a while, out in the Gulf.
Well, it's hardly the same thing as a real shooting war, there, was it? It's good to be at sea. You know, somehow, I always feel 6 inches taller when I'm out there. Oh, by the way, my name is Andrew, but you can call me Andy.
And you can call me Sir. As he reached manhood, the press gleefully catalogued his liaisons with the ladies, some discreet, some less so. But it was extrovert model Vicky Hodge who happily told the world what transpired between her and Andrew on HMS Invincible while it was docked in Barbados. Vicky revealed how she had made love to Andrew amongst the tropical flowers. She claimed that her brief encounter with the prince lasted 8 days before he sailed into the blue. One event in Andrew's life clearly had a serious effect on him. During the Falklands conflict, he demonstrated his true professionalism as a naval officer. A humbler Andrew emerged from heat of battle, and he said afterwards, "I was just one of the pilots."
I think that Prince Andrew went into the Falklands War a child, a young man, and came out a very cynical older man. And it was something which clearly could have been life-threatening, and the Queen and Prince Philip and the rest of the royal family expected almost daily to hear that their son, that Prince Andrew, had been killed. And it was a miracle that he survived.
He was going to be left out of the task force, and he demanded of his mother, in a meeting with the Chief of Staff and the Prime Minister at Windsor Castle, he said that he must go. He said, as a naval officer, this is my place, I must go. And if you don't let me go, then I shall resign my commission.
He was shown no favours, as far as I know, and he acted very bravely also, as far as we know. And therefore, he must have, as most young men would have done in that circumstance, he must have thought about his life and where he was going and what he was doing. I guess it's most people's impression that he came back a slightly, what shall we say, more sensible sort of character.
The following year, Andrew was to woo Sarah Ferguson. It was Princess Diana who engineered an invitation for Sarah to join the royal family for dinner at Windsor Castle. They were married on the 23rd of July, 1986. In the early years of their marriage, they were clearly besotted with each other. In fact, they could hardly keep their hands off each other, and they would kiss quite openly in public.
Fergie met Prince Andrew on the rebound. At the Italian Grand Prix, she asked the man she'd been living with for 3 years, Paddy McNally, "Will you marry me?" He had 2 children to whom she was a devoted stepmother, so it's called. And he said, "No, I don't want to get married again. I certainly don't want to do it now." And she said, "Well, it's or else." And the or else was that in 1985, having known him since she was about 5, she'd re-met Prince Andrew.
When Prince Andrew became engaged to Sarah Ferguson, as she then was, I was quite enchanted by the fact that they were very loving to each other, very obviously loving, very tactile, quite unlike what we have come to expect from the royals. I imagine it was for several reasons. I mean, one was that, to be honest, they both had sexual experience already.
Their relationship was immensely physical, which suited them both. There was some criticism, however, of their taste in certain matters, notably in the design of their new home, Sunninghill Park, which critics considered had the grace and charm of a large supermarket. Times were changing, and through the 1980s, the young royals had become celebrities in every sense of the word. They encouraged this and started to live it up. The pressures of royalty seemed at this time to be far away, as a new character emerged in his own right.
Straight to Sandringham, or are you stopping in London, sir?
Sandringham. I have everything I need for Christmas in Devon. How about you?
Yeah, yes, I'm all fixed up, sir. I left the presents with the family before I came down to fetch you. You must be about ready for a break, Axmate. Just don't ever do it during the festivities. You'll never believe how hard it'll be when you go back.
I'm not going back.
No, sir. I mean, in January, for the rest of the course.
I know. I'm not going back to that place. Or the bloody course.
But, sir, how are you going to be an officer in the Royal Marines if you don't finish the course?
I've changed my mind. I don't want anything to do with it.
It's always hard in training. I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, once you've got through that, well, they know that you can hack it.
But I don't think I can.
It's probably the toughest course in the whole of the armed forces, sir. I mean, there's no wonder you're knackered. I mean, once you're through, everything will be fine, sir.
But it's not a question of being knackered. I hate every minute of it. The people, the endless humiliations.
What sort of humiliations?
Oh, I don't know. It seems every bastard's got it in for me. This morning's parade, I was wearing the dress cap. And I asked the corporal how it looks. And he said, "It looks lovely, darling." And kissed me in front of the entire bloody parade.
The NCOs are bullying the new intakes. Nothing new, sir. It's the last chance they get to take it out on the officers.
I just don't want to be a Royal Marine. They can have their bursary back. I can't do it.
Christ. Have you told anybody else this?
No.
It's not going to go down too well, sir, is it?
No.
I mean, what's your father going to say? I mean, once he comes down off the ceiling.
It's what I've been thinking about for the last 4 months.
All right, sir. With the greatest respect, sir, we've got about 3 hours to sort something out before we get there. That is, unless, of course, the M25's up the spout, in which case we've probably got about 3 days. But we'd better get on it. All right, sir.
It's significant that he broke the news of his failure in the Marines to his detective and not first of all to his father. When eventually he did break the news to his father, his life was a misery for quite a long period.
Prince Philip is a very strong character, and I imagine that there may have been a rift between him and Edward, but how do you know? We don't know. But I think it's quite possible that there was, and I think it's quite possible that things have never been the same since.
Prince Edward is a very sensitive young man, and why he chose the Marines and why he was allowed to choose the Marines is beyond anyone, because it was never going to work. And he soon saw that these people, while very worthy and very brave, were not his sort of people.
The abiding images of royalty in the late 80s are frivolous ones. On the ski slopes, at Ascot, at work and at play, the youngsters could be seen to be having a good time. But behind those frivolous images, the reality was very different.
I can't stop, Charles. I've got to take the boys riding.
I wanted a word with you about that.
What is it?
I think maybe they should take a break from riding for a while.
Nonsense, Charles. They love it.
Then I think they and you should change instructors.
I wouldn't even consider it. James is brilliant, Charles.
Diana. Diana! My God, why won't you ever do what I say?
Why should I, Charles, when you speak such rubbish? You're pathetic. Why don't you just say what you mean and get it over with? Or do you have to keep running back to Camilla to complain every time, just because nobody understands you? You make me sick.
Always bring that name up, don't you, at any excuse, but I won't be sidetracked, Diana. It's got to stop. I won't have you making me look a fool.
You do that perfectly well yourself, Charles. Talking to your bloody rhododendrons and banging on about your organic vegetables. You should have married one of them. That's all you're good for, whinging. I don't know how Camilla puts up with it. Even your bloody flowers can't answer you back.
You are so stupid. You don't have an ounce of intelligence inside your thick head. Are you totally incapable of thinking? Or of having any views on matters which don't concern your pathetic, brainless circle of friends?
Charles, why don't you just live your life as you choose and let me get on with mine?
Diana has blamed the friendship of Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles for contributing to her unhappiness, but many royal watchers think that is not entirely fair. Diana herself was soon to reach a turning point in her life on a skiing trip with Charles to Cloisters. After a photo call, she decided not to continue skiing, a decision which may have saved her life. Within hours, a close friend was dead and another critically injured.
Diana was friends with the wife. It was much more of a personal involvement for Charles than Diana. She was, of course, broken up by the tragedy because she saw a friend of hers who was pregnant losing her husband. And on that very same holiday, Catherine Soames had run off with another man who'd been married 4 times. So there were other ramifications of the Cloisters holidays which I've never gone into, which gave Diana also food for thought and for feeling that perhaps life was very unfair.
Before long, Beatrice was born to the Duke and Duchess of York. They decided not to take the baby with them on a trip to Australia. This was the beginning of what was to become increasingly bad press coverage. Their relationship began to deteriorate.
The prime giveaway in the relationship, the breakup, the relationship between Fergie and Prince Andrew was absolutely simple. Anyone could have gotten onto it. He stopped going home. He was down the road at some naval course, and I suppose he was about 20 minutes away. But he didn't go home. Now, any red-blooded sailor with a desirable wife would have been very quickly in his car and back home before the gong had finished ringing. But he didn't.
And she put poor Andrew first for a long time. It was only when she realised that Andrew could give her nothing in return that she, just like Princess Diana, started enjoying the company of other men, brighter, sparklier, more intelligent men of the world.
By the end of 1988, the royal family was in turmoil. Anne and Mark had effectively gone their separate ways. The seeds of the destruction of the Yorks' marriage had already been sown, and Charles and Diana were leading separate lives. It was only a matter of time before something dramatic would occur. What was remarkable was the nature of the event and how it came to public attention. The effects were to be staggering and contributed as much as anything to the crisis in the House of Windsor.
Do you know, honey, as we go into 1990, I can't imagine what it was that brought us together on that first night.
I know.
And let's make full use of it.
I know.
Funnily enough, it doesn't hold any terror, any sort of fright for me at all. I wish we were going to be together tonight.
I know. I want you to think about me after midnight. Are you going to stay up to see the new year in?
You don't have to encourage me to think about you. I've been doing nothing else for the last 3 months. Did you go to church today?
Yes, of course.
Did you squeak? Did you say lots of prayers?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did.
Did you? Kiss me, darling. I can't tell you what a smile that's put in my face, darling. I'll be back in London tomorrow night.
Good.
Back on home territory. So no more awful breaks.
No.
Do you know, darling, I couldn't really bear the thought of not speaking to you every moment. It fills me with real horror, you know?
It's purely mutual.
Is it? I really hate the idea of it, you know. It really sort of makes me scared. Have you seen him at all today, apart from lunch?
I have. We went out to tea. It's just so difficult, so complicated. He makes my life real torture.
Did you talk in the car?
Yes, but nothing in particular, Ray.
Oh. Kiss me, please. Do you know what I'm going to be imagining doing tonight at about 12 o'clock? Just holding you so close to me. It'll have to be delayed action for 48 hours. Fast forward.
Fast forward. I should tell him I'm going for acupuncture, I think.
Oh, squidge. Cover them footsteps.
Jolly well do.
I think it's all right. I think those footsteps are doing all right. Oh, Squidgy, I love you. I love you. I love you.
You're just the nicest person in the whole wide world.
It's just so nice being able to help you.
You do. You'll never know how much.
I will. I just feel so close to you, darling. So wrapped up in you. I'm wrapping you up, protecting.
Yes, please. Yes, please. I must go and kiss my small ones.
Oh, no, Squidgy, I don't want you to.
No, I've got to.
Can you bear with me for 5 more minutes?
Yes.
Laugh some more. I love it when I hear you laughing. You know I'm happy when you're happy.
I know you are.
And I cry when you cry.
You're so sweet. At this rate, we won't even need any dinner on Tuesday night. Now, all the love in the world, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.
The Princess of Wales was spending the New Year holiday, 1989-1990, at Sandringham with her children, her husband, and the rest of the senior royals. And she did what it appeared was her habit of an evening. She got on the phone.
Diana Gate tapes, I believe, in fact, I am certain, were the work of a very deep and sinister dirty tricks department. Nothing will ever persuade me that these tapes came out by accident. I believe the people who did reveal them didn't really know what it was all about.
I think if you're talking about them being picked up at random by 2 radio hams, it really isn't a major coincidence. For a start, out of all the phone calls that are made from the royal family, from their private apartments in the course of a day, a week, a year, it's very odd that ones that are picked up should come from Princess Diana, the most perhaps controversial figure within the royal family.
Meanwhile, things were deteriorating at Sunninghill Park. Andrew's increasingly lengthy absences from home meant that the Duchess found herself trapped in a vicious circle. As Andrew was away, she was criticised for her behaviour in his absence. But as he was away, she had no one else to turn to for support.
What is it? I can't stop. I'm due for a round of golf.
I wish you'd never started that bloody game.
What's this all about?
It's just that I hardly ever see you these days, that's all.
Come on. I turned down that sea posting so we could have more time together.
That's not the point. You're working all week. You come home knackered on Friday night, then you spend the weekend trudging around the golf course.
Well, then why don't you come too?
It's not exactly my idea of fun, that's why.
Well, that's hardly my fault, is it?
That's not fair. I'm the one who gets all the flack from the bloody press, and you just swan around having fun all the time.
Well, then keep a lower profile, and they won't have any reason to attack you quite so often. Use your common sense.
Thanks a bunch, Andrew. Thanks a bloody bunch. Is that all the support and advice you can give me?
Right now, yes.
Then bugger off and play your little boys' games. I don't know why we had this place built. You need a nursery. You're only happy in your boys' own worlds, aren't you? Playing sailors and out with the lads.
Don't be ridiculous. You're just overtired. You'll feel better once you're on holiday.
In 1990, the rift between Charles and Diana was highlighted when he fell off a horse playing polo. The princess was in London when the news reached her that he had broken his arm in 2 places. Diana was in a quandary. She knew she should rush to his side, but it is reported she couldn't be bothered. They were now openly unhappy together, and they chose to spend most of their time apart.
The time Charles had his polo accident, Diana had had time to take stock of the marriage, and she'd gone through a very, very bad period with Charles.
The royal family weren't very much help to Prince Charles in his time of agony and the breakdown of his marriage. His father certainly might have taken some enjoyment from it. His mother was unable to help simply because Charles never asked her.
I primarily blame Charles for not entering the marriage in a modern, acceptable way, and not giving his princess the full scope that she should have had in the early years, and reaching a stage where she became not just a competitor, but then an adversary. And really, it was his fault.
Charles is so staid, such a young old fogey set in his ways, that Diana found herself totally reliant on her own devices, on her own friends. She couldn't hold a serious conversation with Charles or his friends. They're all intellectuals.
But the rift between them was soon to become more public than either of them had envisaged.
What is it? What's the matter? Why can't I call you from Kent Palace?
Listen, I'm coming under pressure from a newspaper. It seems they've got a tape.
A tape? Oh, God, what's on it?
Look, I don't think it's anything too sensational. They wouldn't have bothered hunting me down. Apparently, it's a phone call from New Year's Eve a year ago.
Shit, that means my phone's bugged. But I was at Sandringham then.
Look, it could be we're just unlucky. I was on my mobile, and apparently you get a lot of radio hams listening in these days trying to pick up on racing tips. But you've got to be careful.
What are we going to do? Are they going to publish it?
I can't tell. They may not have enough info yet, but they're obviously digging. It's only a matter of time.
Oh, no.
Listen, I've been talking to some of the pals, and we think we've got a plan.
What is it?
Well, there's a journalist writing this book about you.
Yes, I know, I heard about it. But what can he do?
Well, what if one of us approaches him and offers him help? You wouldn't have to meet him, but we could sort of give him some inside information.
Sort of get in first, show my side of the story.
Yeah, exactly. That way it'll look much better for you.
Brilliant. When will they publish?
Well, that's what we've got to find out.
The business about the Morton book is fascinating, because I don't believe that Andrew, whom I know well, ever set out to write that book. I think he set out with the dream of writing a different kind of book, and suddenly all this material was given to him by acquiescence of those that have now been named as sources, and certainly they would never have done so without the princess's tacit approval.
Everyone was led to believe by the dirty tricks department at the palace that she didn't like this and that she'd cut off her friends. And yet, mysteriously, every picture desk in Fleet Street received a call saying precisely at what time she'd be on the doorstep of her principal friend, who was one of the principal informants to the book.
While Diana's friends were rallying around her, the Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, was coming under increasing pressure from the press and also the royal family itself.
Of course, there was a time when the party had to stop for Sarah Ferguson, and I think that turning point was not just when she got on the verge of a breakdown with the stress of all the public criticism, but when those photographs were found in a London flat of her and her American friend Steve Wyatt on holiday. Of course, something had to be done, because this was a royal who was acting out of character. She was not acting as a royal family is expected to act.
Afternoon, Father. What can we do you for?
Andrew, wait outside, please. Sarah? Has anyone offered you tea or anything?
No, actually.
Well, we'll organise something. You must be wondering why we've summoned you like this. There are so many reasons to choose from, but let's start with this man, Wyatt. I'm appalled at your behaviour. So is the Queen.
He's Andrew's friend as well.
Shut up and listen. I don't want to debate about the matter. These 120 photographs that were found by a cleaner, did any of them feature Andrew? No, I thought not. Andrew may have his faults, but he would hardly have been guilty of staggering indiscretion. It seems touch and go whether these things will ever get published. But their familiarity has been well covered in the press. How many more photographs of what degree of intimacy with unsuitable men friends are you going to make us suffer? And then there's this. Her Majesty the Queen ordered you last year to stop seeing this man before any further embarrassment was caused. We learn that you've since seen him at least twice at his flat in Cadogan Square. First, how did this newspaper find out that you were so ordered? Second, did you seriously believe this wouldn't come out eventually? Why do you think we instructed you to drop this man in the first place? Do you not realize when you are told to do something, it's final? It's not a request, it's not a suggestion, it's simple instruction to be obeyed and not buggered about with. But let's pass on from this sorry business. These photographs were taken in May 1990, I believe, when you were on holiday in the Med. In June, you were on holiday in the United States. In July, you were on holiday in Argentina and later on the south of France. In August, you managed to join the rest of the family at Balmoral for a while, and in September, you were on holiday in Australia. Then later on, you went skiing yet again, as your jaunt around Switzerland in January clearly hadn't been enough for 1 year. Have you any idea what harm this spectacular unemployment does to the image of the royal family? In 1989, you took 8 holidays. This year, you took 7 and failed to attend the remembrance service at either the Cenotaph or the Albert Hall. Last month, you went to Closter's again and took your children, apparently unaware that Beatrice had chicken pox. You have just returned from Florida. We are given headlines that would be more appropriate to a kindergarten if it didn't involve smoking and alcohol. Your only engagement in Florida was to attend a polo charity match with your father, I believe.
Andrew, come in, please.
This is how it's going to be from now on. Sarah, you will cancel all future engagements, except those of particular importance, and you will clear those with the palace. You will then clear all future engagements that way before you accept them. You will not go on holiday in the next few months, and you will not accept any free trips anywhere under any circumstances. The pair of you will get your act together and will quell all this ridiculous speculation that's going on.
1992 began badly for the House of Windsor and got rapidly worse. The publication of photographs of the Duchess of York with Texan Steve Wyatt were nothing to what was to come later. The Yorks split up amid the sort of headlines never seen before.
I think that the turning point in her life came when she was 5 months pregnant with Princess Eugenie, and that was when she met Steve Wyatt, who's an alternative type of Texan, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't take drugs, but is into a lot of mystical things. And he turned her head.
In her arrogance, Fergie thought she could take on the firm. She thought she had paid her dues, was a member, and could do and get away with whatever she chose. Perhaps history will show that she can. After all, she's likely to leave the firm with a whole heap of money.
Andrew, of course, from birth, he's always been a member of the royal family. He knows what's right, he knows what's expected of him. Sarah would have none of that. She wanted to enjoy life to the full.
He should have realized that Sarah is extremely sexy, that she doesn't like living without a man in her life.
Then came the book, Diana, Her True Story.
Did Diana really attempt suicide? Did she try to kill herself 4 or 5 times, as sometimes been claimed? I think not. I think that Diana has made some powerful cries for help. She has been an emotionally sick lady, but I don't think for one moment that she seriously tried to kill herself. is nonsense.
Several national newspapers have linked James Gilby to the Diana Gate tapes, alleging that he is the man. However, this has not been confirmed or denied and is still very much speculation.
While researching our book, Fall of the House of Windsor, we had the tapes analysed by experts in both America and in Great Britain. We sought the advice also of the American FBI and of contacts in British MI5. All agreed, or the experts agreed, that it was indeed the voice of Princess Diana. All the experts equally agreed that there was something more mysterious in these tapes than merely the case of radio hams plucking them off the airwaves.
Within days, the most spectacular photographs were published of the Duchess of York with her financial advisor, Johnny Bryan, on holiday in Saint-Tropez.
If those pictures had come out on Christmas Day of her not in a bikini, half in a bikini, and fooling around as she was doing, it would have excited the same attention that it did in summer, that as newspapermen we call the silly season, because nothing normally happens, but this particular summer a tremendous amount happened. Those pictures were quite amazing.
Prince Andrew is extremely disappointed in the publicity that surrounded her new liaison. He felt that John Bryan, who has been acting as her financial advisor, in fact, both their financial advisors for about a year now, he felt that John Bryan was just a friend.
What they have not been able to understand since is how he can take such a docile view about the other men, in his wife's life. I mean, where most of us would have respected him a lot more if he'd taken a 7-iron and gone and beaten the daylights out of them.
As the summer progressed, the atmosphere of crisis grew. Observers could see that matters had reached unprecedented levels of hostility. The drama was developing day by day. The protagonists could either continue to wage war by proxies, or some sort of truce had to be called. But how long could it last?
The situation is clearly so bloody awful that it doesn't make sense pussyfooting about the place. The Queen and I are both appalled that you've allowed things to reach this extraordinary state, but since you have, we may as well get on with it. So, what exactly do you want out of this?
I want to be able to lead my life as I choose, without interference.
Yes, we can take all that sort of stuff for granted. I mean, what do you want from a practical point of view?
I want a divorce. I want custody of the children. And I want my own palace. And I want the right to continue to fulfill my public engagements. And I want continuing recognition of my official standing as mother to second in line to the throne.
Have you any comments to make on this, Charles?
I'm not prepared to agree to a divorce.
Neither am I.
I don't see how you can refuse me.
Perhaps we can't. But let's get one thing straight from the start. The children will never leave this family. The children will be continued to be brought up within this family, in a royal palace. If you press for a divorce, you will not get custody of them.
But I'm their mother. I must have custody.
And she's the Queen. And what she wants is what will happen. End of story. That is why you should think very carefully before you do anything else. You've already done this family extraordinary, possibly irreparable harm. But leaving aside whatever personal problems you may have encountered within your marriage, you should take time to consider your position and ours on this side of the table.
I'm aware of that.
All I'm saying is, don't start any battles which quite simply you cannot win. Do I make myself clear?
Yes.
Then I would ask you yet again, what is it that you want?
Perhaps you would like to think things over. I don't believe we should rush into anything.
I think that's right. But we must agree that from now on this conversation be conducted in private, between ourselves, and not through proxies of any kind.
That goes without saying. Diana?
All right. Let's wait a bit and see what the future brings.
Whereas Charles and Diana decided to wait and see, Fergie and Andy were less patient. Fergie's lust for love and money took a grip on her, and she ended up with debts of £3 million, some of which the Queen herself bailed her out of, but in the end it became a severe embarrassment. Equally so, her love affair with Johnny Bryan, for indeed it was a full-blown liaison. There were new scandalous revelations about Bryan's visit to Fergie's home. Sometimes when Andrew was downstairs, Bryan and the Duchess would be upstairs. Eventually, Fergie became such a public relations disaster to the royal family that the Queen put her foot down and demanded a divorce, and fast. And it all came to a head in 1996, and a divorce went through a quickie, and that was the end of dear Fergie. Fergie's past is scarlet, and her future is somewhat grey. She has tried to make money out of her creation, Budgie the helicopter. That's worked to a degree, but it hasn't made as much as she thought, and she is desperately in need of funds. It's likely that she will end up on the minor royalty celeb cocktail circuit, and that probably means Palm Beach. As for Andrew, poor Andrew, cuckolded Andrew, he has emerged from the collapse of his marriage with some dignity, and he retains a sort of gung-ho, boyish charm. But golf has really taken over from all other interests in his life, certainly women, and I think a quiet, obscure future lies ahead for him on the 17th hole.
The end of 1992 culminated a year in which the greatest heritage disaster that Britain had ever experienced occurred. On the night of Saturday, the 21st of November, one of the great symbols of Britain's royal heritage, Windsor Castle, burnt down. To the Queen, who was in tears as she watched, it was the worst night of her life. It culminated a year which she was to call in Latin her annus horribilis.
There had been a great disillusion with the royals that year. Quite apart from the problems with Charles and Diana, there was an outcry over the fact that the Queen, supposedly the richest woman in the world, paid no taxes. And indeed she had to concede to so do by the time that year was out. But what the public was most concerned about was the marriage of the heir to the throne. And Charles and Diana were, to a degree, put out of their misery in December of that year by the reluctant but most dramatic announcement that the pair of them were to separate.
This is the 6 o'clock news. The Prime Minister today announced to a hushed House of Commons that the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate. In a brief statement, he went on to say, "Their Royal Highnesses have no plans to divorce and their constitutional positions are unaffected." The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh are said to be saddened by the news and sympathise with the difficulties that have led to this decision. The Prime Minister finished his statement by saying, "The succession to the throne is unaffected." The children of the Prince and Princess retain their positions in the line of succession, and there is no reason why...
I think although people obviously knew that things were desperately wrong between Charles and Diana, people did still find it a great, great shock when John Major, our Prime Minister, announced it in the House of Commons that the separation was official. I remember standing in my newspaper office and watching it, and actually my heart went, this is something quite dramatic. I think almost as one would have felt the announcement of the abdication. It was a great effect on the monarchy, the future of the monarchy. And I think this announcement was equal to the announcement of the abdication. Because immediately the questions were, what the hell is going to happen now? Will Diana ever be queen? Will Charles ever be king? What will happen to the two boys?
If the Queen thought 1992 was an annus horribilis, nothing could have prepared her for what was to come in 1993. The first blow fell in what is now known as the Camillagate scandal. This was a recording made by a radio ham some 3 years earlier, in the same way as the now infamous Squidgygate tape, except this time it was Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles on the telephones. Charles was speaking to Mrs. Parker Bowles as he lay in his bed after completing a brief tour of Wales. The conversation was spellbinding. The couple whisper intimacies to each other and discuss what are obviously regular, if not weekly, clandestine meetings. During the 6-minute tape, Charles says twice that he loves Camilla. She says 11 times that she loves him. He calls her darling 7 times. She calls him darling 18 times. He says he adores her and bids her farewell around 19 times. The Camillagate tape revealed the true depth of the love affair that Prince Charles had been conducting on the side and gave Diana the ammunition she had needed.
Of course, everybody knew that Camilla Parker Bowles was in the background throughout the marriage, and indeed very much before. But this was only really speculation. It was actually shocking evidence when the so-called Camillagate tapes became public. I think it was shocking for 2 reasons. First, of course, it was hard proof that Camilla and Charles were lovers, that there was a physical relationship, that before he married Diana, they were lovers. But more importantly, once they were married, she was his mistress, which was quite a shocking thing to take on board for the public. But I think also what might have amazed the public and the great ardent fans of Charles was the tone of the conversation. I mean, one knows that lovers in private talk very intimately and say some very silly things, very childish things. But I think it was the lewdness of the talk and the words. It wasn't particularly a romantic conversation. It wasn't particularly loving or warm. It was very graphic, very physical. And I think people probably would have expected more of Charles. He always comes across as a loving man. He always wants to be seen as a great romantic. And I think this was actually very disappointing that his talk was of that level. And it wasn't warmth, it wasn't romantic, it wasn't the Prince Charming we like to think of Charles. It was very graphic, very almost schoolboy basic talk.
The extent of the deviousness that the pair had gone to was revealed subsequently. For instance, when Diana was not at Highgrove, Camilla would visit. A bedroom would be prepared for her. The security systems would then be put out of action, and Camilla would creep along the corridor to Charles's suite. In the morning, the staff, before Diana returned, had to get rid of what they called the evidence. They would crumple up both sides of the bed that Camilla would have been sleeping in, or should have been sleeping in, and put clean sheets down in Charles's bed, where, of course, Camilla had spent the night. It was that tawdry.
It was subsequently alleged that when Camilla told Charles that her husband, Andrew Parker Bowles, wanted to divorce her, Charles, fearful of the further scandal, had begged her not to allow him to do so. It seems he wanted the husband he had cuckolded to remain married to his lover.
What would we do without these Sunday evenings?
I think I should die.
The old man was extremely miffed on Tuesday. I don't think Andrew believed me. My supposed illness was a little sudden, considering he spoke to me that afternoon. It was very naughty. A senior officer's retirement due. I should have gone.
I know I ask a lot. I just need to snatch every moment I can with you.
I know. Charles. I don't think the old man can take this much more. I think he's beginning to break. I mean, I know the firm have had a quiet word with him, but we are a little indiscreet at times. I'm convinced all the staff know about us. Your man, your valet, what's his name?
Ken? Ken Stronach?
There's something about him. I can't put my finger on it, but it's... When he looks at me, it's as if he's laughing at me.
No, nonsense. Ken's the epitome of discretion. And it was his idea to separate my pyjamas from the rest of the laundry after our al fresco night at Highgrove.
I just think the lengths we go to are a bit farcical at times.
I sometimes wonder how I haven't had a serious accident in the pitch darkness.
That's what I'll call you.
What?
The Prince of Darkness. Maybe it would have been easier if you hadn't married the mouse.
Oh, darling, we've been over this time and time again. You know the rules. Why are you so uptight tonight? Is there something on your mind?
I was hoping not to tell you this, hoping it would pass.
What? What is it?
It's Andrew. He wants to divorce me.
Divorce? No, but he can't. It's impossible. It would ruin everything.
He says this sham, this facade needs to end. He says we're making a fool of him.
Camilla, you have got to get him to stay in this marriage. If he divorces you, the firm will hit the roof.
Do you think I don't know that? Charles, it's not what I want. But he's adamant. He says he wants an end to all these lies, this deceit.
Camilla, if he divorces you, don't even contemplate remarriage. You realize what this means, do you? If you divorce your husband, I may never become king.
Charles's affair with Camilla reached such a head of steam that he was forced eventually and reluctantly to confess, and he did so in a television program. He confessed to an affair once his marriage had irretrievably broken down with Camilla Parker Bowles, and suddenly we had the prospect of the heir to the throne, the head of the Church of England, the defender of the faith, admitting publicly to adultery. The British royal family had never known anything like it.
After their separation announcement, Charles and Diana had hoped that the pressure on them would ease. It did not. And the most explosive bombshell to hit the royal family was yet to come. His name was James Hewitt. Hewitt had been introduced to Diana at a dinner party in 1985, and sometime shortly after that, they became lovers.
The affair was only fully revealed in the autumn of 1994, when a book was written about Hewitt, largely discredited and certainly disbelieved by Diana's close friends and supporters. But it was true. Diana had had a love affair with James Hewitt, James who shortly afterwards became known as the Cad Hewitt, and she was forced to confess that in an hour-long television special in 1995, and this is what she said. The interviewer asked her, "Did your relationship go beyond a close friendship?" Diana, "Yes, it did, yes." "Were you unfaithful?" And Diana said of Hewitt, "Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him, but I was very let down." And indeed she was.
James Hewitt, the soldier who thought he was brought in as a family riding instructor, soon came to believe that he could aspire to become the Prince Charming to an emotionally unawakened sleeping princess.
Would you like to ride again tomorrow?
Yes, I'd love to. I've got a charity lunch, but it's only in Park Lane. We could aim for a hack early morning after breakfast.
Good. I'll meet you at 9:30.
Be lovely. James, thank you so much for coming for supper.
Thank you for a superb meal.
It's so nice not to eat alone.
Now, stop that. We've talked this through. You're not alone. You have many friends. Friends who admire you, who adore you, who love you deeply.
Yes, but not a husband who loves me. Do you know, the other day, when Charles was here, I almost suggested to him the perfect compromise. I become his bit on the side and hang on his arm at official functions, and he gets the Rottweiler to move in, so he gets what he really wants. We could all live here in the palace. Just one great, big, happy family.
Now, stop that. I won't have any more of this, or I...
Or what?
Nothing.
James, there's only one thing in my life worth living for now.
I just want to make you feel whole again. What would have happened if you hadn't have fallen off that horse when you were a child?
I don't understand the question.
Well, think about it. If you hadn't have fallen, you wouldn't have lost confidence. So you wouldn't have needed to get it back, and I wouldn't have been introduced to you.
And we wouldn't just have made love.
I feel as if I'm looking down on myself, like I'm on the ceiling, looking down at this person below me.
What do you see?
I see someone in love.
Do you, James?
Yes.
How do I know you won't be like all the rest?
Diana, what do you want?
I want this to never end. I want the clock to go back 5 years. I want to get out of this dreadful, lonely mess. I want to be a woman again. And I want to be with you, James. But that thought scares me.
Why?
Because how do I know you're not going to let me down? James, promise me you won't let me down. Swear to me you won't be like all the rest.
Diana, I'll always be here. I'll never let you down.
James, I love you so much. Promise me you won't let it end.
Shush.
Promise me.
I promise.
I think Diana, although a lot of people have obviously gone against her now, does actually have a very sad choice in men. I think is always destined to be unlucky in love. Of course, Charles and her didn't work out. And in the background was James Hewitt, who she actually admitted on TV she loved very much and had a physical relationship with. But I think if you look at James Hewitt, he's what us British would call sort of the chinless wonder, very much an army wimp of a man. There's no doubting he loved her and Diana loved him. But I don't think it was actually a very sort of intellectual relationship. It was a physical one. She was a very lonely woman looking for something. But I think James Hewitt obviously is another one who betrayed her trust. He liaised with Anna Pasnack to write the book Princess in Love, which although it came across as a romantic novel, and everybody sneered at it at the time, saying, what a lot of rubbish, how could this have happened, how could wonderful Diana have sullied herself? But of course, it was proved right a couple of years later, when in fact, when Diana said, yes, we had the affair, and in more interviews with James Hewitt, it did become clear that a lot of this fictional book, as it was in fact true. She did, in fact, lead him by the hand and take him to bed, which I think was sort of quite remarkable, and I think it probably shows another side to Diana as well.
Diana's frank confession on television of an adulterous affair with James Hewitt and her further criticisms of the House of Windsor in the same interview was seen by many royal observers as a declaration of war by her on the whole royal family. It was therefore no surprise when the Queen, who was in despair at the unprecedented damage being done to the monarchy, soon after ordered the divorce of Charles and Diana. For months, speculation was rife about the nature of the settlement, but whatever was agreed was clearly a decision fought to a bitter conclusion between just the two key players.
Diana, it's Charles.
Oh, hi.
Look, I think we both agree things are getting pretty out of hand.
Charles, I just want all this to be over, so I can start my life again.
I know.
It's so unfair. Whenever we talk, we seem to sort things out, and then they get involved and we just go back to square one.
I agree.
It's always me who's in the wrong. I'm always the gold digger, trying to screw the firm. It's just not fair.
Look, you know that a lot of this is out of my hands.
Why can't we do what we agreed at Kensington? It seemed so simple.
I agree, but when I explained it to my lot, they came up with all sorts of problems.
Charles, you're pushing me into a corner which has no doors and no way out. I can't and I won't be pushed anymore.
Diana, I want this to be over too.
Then tell your people to be reasonable.
Well, your lawyers are hardly playing the game.
Charles, what do you expect them to do? I'm not going to be trodden over like some doormat. I never wanted any of this. I was prepared to give you another...
Please, Diana. You don't have to go over this again. I rang to see if we can finally sort things out.
Charles, is it you who wants to sort things out? Or her?
Diana, I'm trying to be reasonable. It's me who wants to bring this to an end, nobody else.
So?
I'm going to suggest that we go back to what we agreed at Kensington Palace.
At last, some sanity and reason.
But
I knew it.
only one. The palace handles the press, and it's done at their speed. You have to tell your people there must be a total news blackout. And I mean total. No slip-ups.
My title?
As we agreed.
The settlement?
As we agreed.
Charles, how can I believe you?
Diana, you just have to trust me.
Charles, I can't believe you just said that. No doubt I'll await another letter from your people.
Diana had agreed to a divorce, but in fending for the interests of herself and her sons, she had been further ground down by the palace machine. Faced with an unworkable, self-imposed exile on home ground, the fashionable wisdom is that Diana will seek to establish herself abroad. A flurry of transatlantic trips has fueled speculation that she will settle in America.
Strange enough, it seems that America is more of a home for Diana now than England is. She seems more at home there. And she's greatly respected by the Americans still, because obviously of her charity work. She's still very much a fairy tale princess to them. And I don't think they're really interested in all the sort of rather sordid goings-on in Britain. They actually see what she is, a rather regal lady, a very pretty, very beautiful lady, who does an awful lot of charity work. She's passionate about her 2 boys and family life. And she has actually done an awful lot, despite the sort of slight reservations, an awful lot for the monarchy, by becoming this great fairy tale person. So what will happen to her in the future is difficult to say. Perhaps she will make America her home. Perhaps she feels more secure, more comfortable, more wanted there, because Diana does need to feel wanted. And of course, talking about being wanted, who will take her on? She desperately needs love in her life. She needs a man in her life. But as we've all seen, it's not easy if you're the Princess of Wales to find love. Either the man of your choice lets you down, either with other women or sort of by going to the papers, or you sort of find that your relationship is very, very public. So it's going to be a very strong man who's actually going to sort of take Diana on full time. I think she deserves some happiness and some real love. But you sort of look around, you think, well, what is there in it for a man taking Diana on? He can't have a secret affair. They can't have a private life together. Every time they go out together, they're going to be photographed. So it's a bit of a tall order. Maybe Diana's hoping in her heart that she'll carry on with her charity work for a while, and hopefully when the dust settles down, she'll find true love again and maybe even sort of start another family with this man. I think now she desperately does sort of want a little bit of peace and quietude and sort of be alone for a while and gather her thoughts and sort of hope that there is happiness in the future to come.
But in giving up much of her royal power and prestige, she is, in her own words, well out of the palace, the firm, and the would-be courtiers who have shown her so much ill will. However, they may discover that Diana's departure from the royal scene will make them all losers. So what does the future hold? The British monarchy has survived so far through a mixture of affection and pragmatism, or awe and apathy. It can survive anything except ridicule and contempt. But today the pomp and circumstance have become pantomime, and the idols have forsaken their pedestals. The royal family, so long protected by the Queen from damaging controversy, is now embroiled in it. Scandal dogs the House of Windsor.
I've always believed that the Princess of Wales has got this dynastic urge to be the mother of a king, but not the wife of a king.
Abdication is impossible. It's impossible because she pledged, as her predecessors have, at Westminster Abbey during her coronation, to stay on that throne until God calls her into the next world.
I think England will always have a royal family. They're too well loved, they're too established for it ever to change. I don't think we'll ever see a republic. I mean, God forbid that that should be the case.
The royals have turned the panoply and pageantry of monarchy into mere pantomime. And although the royal family of Great Britain is perhaps not in its terminal throes, it's the last chance for its salvation.
Reform is inevitable. The only question is when and how.
On behalf of the Privy Council, I would point out that by giving this Act of Parliament the royal assent, you do on your behalf and on behalf of your successors agree that the royal assent is abolished forthwith. This means that all future Acts of Parliament will pass immediately into law, including any such acts which may deal with the rights, privileges and duties of yourself and your successors. Therefore, I ask you to consider carefully before signing this act, as the consequences will be enormous, but so would the consequences of not signing it.